Welcome to Empower Her Radio, the space for powerhouse women ready to step into their next level of abundance, purpose, and personal freedom. I'm Dr. Corey Winn, a high performance coach, doctor of physical therapy, philanthropist, and business consultant. I help ambitious women align with their highest calling, expand their wealth and impact, and create a life that feels as good as it looks. If you're a high achieving woman who's built success yet finds yourself craving more alignment, more purpose, more ease, you're in the right place. Here, we bridge the gap between ambition and fulfillment. Through transformative conversations and proven strategies, you'll gain the courage to step into the fullest expression of you. Build a powerhouse business that aligns with your expertise and divine gifts, and lead your life, both personally and professionally, with unshakable confidence, worthiness, and compassion. This is about expansion, legacy, and owning your power unapologetically. You already have everything inside of you to create a life of unlimited possibility. It's time to unlock it. Welcome to your next level. Let's dive in. I am so excited about today's conversation because it hits incredibly close to home. A little bit over a year ago, one of my mentors asked me a question that changed everything. What's the cost of staying where you are? It's a question that echoes in the hearts of so many high achieving women, the ones who've checked all the boxes, climbed every ladder, and still feel something deep within them asking, is this it? I'm so honored to welcome Kristen Chimack to Empower Her Radio. She's the best-selling author of The Cost of Staying, a former executive who left a 30-year career to rediscover her core values, reclaim her joy, and create a new definition of success. If you've ever felt the nudge that you are meant for more, this episode will give you both permission and a roadmap to choose yourself, rewrite your story, and step fully into your power. Kristen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I love that you were asked that question.
I know, I think so many of us would agree that change is hard and scary, and it's easier to stay where you are, where you know. So tell us, kind of start from the beginning. Tell us the story. How did you figure that out for yourself?
Oh gosh, I think I figured that out for myself a couple different times in my life, both personally and professionally. But when I think about my recent big change, walking away from my executive career, it was one of those moments where, I'd worked 30 years at this organization, right? I defined success as making that executive level and ultimately being able to retire from that company. And it was just, I had a moment where I was in the executive role and someone came up to me and said, "Oh, I can tell you just love what you do." And it was a very senior, someone in our C-suite. And inside I'm thinking, I hate what I'm doing. Like, why do you think I love what I like? I
I
really
love
don't.
this transparency.
Yeah, like I don't like what I'm doing. And so I left that conversation because of course I gave the answer, "Oh yes, it's great." And I walked away and I remember sitting in my office thinking, I'm on stages all the time where I'm saying, you need to love what you do. You spend so much time with people you work with. And, I was having people tell me, "Oh, you're so authentic." And inside I'm thinking, but I hate this.
Mhm.
um, and so, I just found that I had really become like authentically who they wanted me to be and who I needed to be to rise to the executive ranks in that organization. And my purpose for doing that was that I wanted to change the culture, right? I wanted to make an impact and change. And then when I got to the executive level, I realized I probably wasn't going to be able to make that impact or that change in the culture. And I wasn't happy. And that's when I really started to think about the cost of staying in
Mhm.
that role was really my inner peace, being able to be who I really am, my own personal joy. And it was impacting, right, relationships with my spouse and family and friends because I wasn't happy.
Mhm.
And so that when that cost of staying started to outweigh, the cost of leaving, which was the paycheck that was very addicting, or the benefits or the pension, that's when I started to really think about, what, how I want to define success for my entire life really has nothing to do with the paycheck and the title and all of those things. It has to do with these relationships that I have, my family, my own joy, being able to do things that I love. And when that's really started to pull on me and outweigh the other more tangible things of the cost of leaving, I that's when I decided it was time for me to go, and the cost of staying was just too high.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's so important that our audience hears that because we're taught, at least my generation was, I watched my parents stay in the same job for over 35 years, which if you would talk to them, they absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I also watched them stay in a place that was safe, quote, safe,
Yeah.
you know. But my dad worked for American Airlines for 35 years, and every like 5 years or so, it was like, oh, are they going to do layoffs? Like, are they not?
Yeah.
So I want to really honor what you said there in that what was the cost, your peace, your happiness, your relationships. And I want our audience to really hear that because if you love your job and love everything that you do and you come home and you feel empowered every day, awesome. That's
Yeah.
exactly where we want you to be. But talk a little bit more about kind of the courage that it took and that moment that you were like, this is not worth it anymore.
Yeah, it took a lot of courage, and I'm similar to you. My dad had worked at this company for over 40 years before he retired. So it was the company that my dad had worked at. It was a company that, I mean, honestly, I don't remember a life where this company wasn't a massive part of my upbringing and just who I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, it was the the courage was really about being okay that what I defined as success and what others maybe expected of me wasn't what I wanted anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that just it took me it wasn't like an overnight decision. It wasn't like I woke up one day and thought, okay, I'm gonna leave now. It was a process of probably in total a couple of years of
Mm-hmm.
me starting to think about, right? First, it was little thoughts like, okay, instead of working till 62, I think I'm going to retire at 58. And then it was instead of 58, definitely 55. And then with the vacation I banked, I could get out at 54. And then it was when I hit my 50s, like, I don't think I'm going to make it to 55. So I really started, and this is what led to having the courage to do it, is I started and was very deliberate about making choices to help me figure out what was missing, where I was, why wasn't I happy, and what did I need in whatever was next? Because I knew there was a next, right? I knew I wasn't going to just retire and not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I spent a lot of work just thinking about where was I out of alignment in the current job? Why was it so difficult? Why was I so unhappy? And then that led to talking about my core values and not just what are they, but what do they really mean to me? And
Mm-hmm.
then that really led to kind of redefining what I thought success was moving forward. And it was very different than what it had been. And so when I started to get all of that aligned, I became very comfortable with the thought, I'm getting out and I'm getting out before 55. Then it was the hard part of sharing that, right? Like the hardest thing I think I probably had to do was call my dad and say, this company that you love and you retired from, and I loved at one point and thought I would retire from, I'm not happy anymore. Like the company's changed, I've changed. I need to leave and do something different. And he knew what that decision meant as far as the things that I was giving up and all. I mean, he was very aware. And so that was probably the hardest conversation. The next
Mm-hmm.
hardest conversation was my sister and brother-in-law still work at the company. I
Uh-huh.
was calling them and just right, everybody has expectations of you
Mm-hmm.
and getting really comfortable with, no, this is going to be how I define this moving forward.
Yeah.
And then of course there were the friends and the coworkers, like all of that. And my husband, even that was an interesting conversation, but just for me, it took a lot of work to get comfortable myself. But then once I was there, it was then trying to manage everybody else's expectations. But honestly, at that point, I kind of knew what I was going to do and I was going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I love hearing about managing other people's expectations because I think so many of us have lived our lives by other people's expectations.
Yeah.
And, I had a similar discussion with my dad, and he's like, "You're going to leave PT? You're going to leave a steady income and not a pension, but,
Yeah.
401k." And I was like, "Yeah, Dad, I am."
Mhm.
And it goes back to that sense of security. And what I'm hearing from you is that you were able to really embody that sense of security within yourself and know that you were safe, period,
Yeah.
and that we're able to move forward and knew that you could take that with you wherever you went.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the other big thing that I did probably a year or two before I left was I started to really focus on building my network outside of that organization,
Hmm.
right? When you work somewhere so long, you are really insulated into people who work there or in that industry. And
Yes.
so I was super deliberate and, I hired myself a coach who was outside of the walls, didn't know anything about the company or the people, or my background. I joined communities of women where there was no one. I was very deliberate. There was no one from my company there, so I felt like I could have the freedom to talk and to share and to explore. And all of those little steps along the way built my confidence that I was going to be okay. And the skills that I'd built over 30 years, whether it was going to work for another corporation or what I ended up doing, starting my own business, that I had one, the confidence in myself to be able to do that, but two, I had built a network outside of the walls of, where I'd worked for 30 years that were rooting me on and cheering for me and supportive and all of those things. So, yeah, it was definitely at the moment, there were times even I thought I was crazy for, for doing it. But I think because I had been thinking about it and preparing for it, I had definitely the confidence and more importantly, the inner peace to walk
Mhm.
away.
I've had several mentors say something along the lines of, if it doesn't feel like you set everything on fire and blew it all up at some point, or that everything's going to come crashing down, then you didn't make the right decision.
Yeah.
Like at some point, you're going to have that, what have I done?
Uh-huh.
kind of a feeling.
Yeah.
Um, Earlier, you talked about core values and really recognizing what
Mhm.
those were. Can you talk a little bit about that? I
Yeah.
think we all kind of have an idea of maybe what our core values are, but
Mhm.
really being aligned with them and moving forward in that way is very critical to future success.
Yeah, so for me, when I really kind of dug into core values, I landed on my top 5 core values of, family, courage, curiosity, transparency, and autonomy. And it's easy to say those words, and as I probably said them, people are probably thinking, "Oh yeah, I family is important to me," or "Courage is important to me." But I really spend a lot of time, and I with my clients, I work with them to spend a lot of time to define what do those really mean and how do they show up. And then once you have that, where are you out of alignment or showing up differently, right? So courage, we'll take courage. So for me, courage is about sharing what's on your mind, speaking your truth, not being afraid of how others are going to react to what you say, but being willing in even the hardest of moments to actually speak the truth.
Mhm.
And it's also demonstrating that for the kids that are in my life, right? My stepkids, my nieces, my nephews,
Mhm.
and supporting them when they have the courage to do and say and speak their truth. So when I really got clear on that, I started to realize at work in my professional role, I was I was holding back so much that's where I was just really out of a misalignment. Whether it was I was unwilling to share what was really happening in the toxic environment, or
Mhm.
I sugarcoated it, or like when asked, "You must really love your job." And instead of saying, "Oh, yeah, it's great," I said, "No, actually, I don't."
Mhm.
So there were just a lot of moments where I found that I was out of misalignment. And so I went through each of my core values. Like, what does family mean? It's less about spending a lot of time with my family, but it's more about making sure that they know that no matter what, whatever they've done, whatever's happened, they can call me at any time, that they need, and I'm going to be there, and that they're confident that I'm going to be there and show up or pick up the phone.
Mhm.
And then, right, you start to figure out, well, how does that show up today? Well, it
Mhm.
doesn't show up very good if every time my boss calls, I'm picking up the phone and then stepping away from the baseball game to address whatever urgent
Right.
issue there may be.
Mhm.
So as I got clear on those core values and really doing a deep dive on, are am I showing up authentically in alignment with those, and where I'm not, why am I not? And then
Mhm.
is it possible too, right? Could I have made changes to stay in that role that would have allowed me to show up authentically in alignment? Potentially. I tried to make some boundaries and some of things like that, but there were also things going on in the organization that just were never going to allow it.
Mhm.
And then that's, where you really start to build the courage, like, okay, I'm always going to be miserable unless I change and do something that's in better alignment.
Mhm. Well, and hearing you talk about, allowing your nieces and nephews and allowing your stepkids to see this
Mhm.
is so important because for my same, I have stepkids and I have a 9-year-old daughter. To have her see that she doesn't have to stay in this lane forever because it was the choice that she made, or that her family has a business, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Um, we work really hard in our family to not just give the answers like, well, how does that sound to you? How does that feel to you? What do
Mhm.
you want? Whereas, I mean, it took me an adult to really sit back and go, oh, that doesn't really feel good to me.
Yeah.
And same with you. I had great dreams of changing the culture and it being different,
Mhm.
and it just wasn't going to be. So
Yeah.
being able to pivot and recognize those core values that you have, and like you did, create something,
Mhm.
or, I created something and I also do contract work with companies that align with my core values.
Yeah.
And the biggest message I feel like I'm hearing from you too is not only having the courage to speak your truth, but having the courage and the trust in yourself that
Mhm.
your expertise will translate to multiple different avenues. I mean, you had
Yeah.
30 years of expertise.
Mhm.
And how amazing that your clients get to have all of that now.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you're in it, right? I remember I remember sitting in my office thinking I've got to do something else. But what possibly could I do? I've worked here for 30 years. Who possibly would want that, how could I even help someone else?
Mhm.
And it's because you get all those inner voices that start to talk to you, because my career wasn't, I'm an accountant by training. I started in accounting, but then I was moved around because I loved change and I loved creating new things. So every
Mhm.
3 or 4 years of my career, I was picked up and dropped sort of into a different area of the organization that needed change. So because of that, I have a wonderfully varied career, from
Mhm.
HR to finance to, you know, subrogation to underwriting to public relations, communications, convention and
Yeah.
travel and meetings. But that becomes daunting when you're thinking about, where else could I go work and what could I do? Because you look at these job descriptions and they're like, we want 30 plus years of experience in X, or more than 15 years experience in communications. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, but I only have 5 years in PR and communications, but it was for a Fortune 40 organization. Like, I've
Mhm.
done a lot, I've seen a lot. Um, so it was daunting. And I think for me, kind of building my network and talking to women who had started their own businesses, who were CEOs in companies that were completely outside of my industry, or, worked in varied industries, and sharing my experience, they were able to say, oh my gosh, your skills would be great here or here. And it was those conversations that in the process really helped me build the confidence to kind of make the change. And the best reward, you know, you were talking about your daughter and stepkids. My one of my nieces, she's, I don't know, probably 6 months after I left, we were out to lunch and she asked me a question. She said, "Do you regret leaving your job?" And I thought, what a question to come from an 11-year-old. No one had asked me that. And so,
Mhm.
we had a conversation about, no, I don't regret it, because I can show up and do things like this in the middle of the day, and I can help you, with your homework or go to your events. And about 2 months after that, she called and said, "Hey, you said you were going to write a book. I want to write a book too. And then, she called me a few months later, her and her brother, we want to start a business. So I helped them start a business and I helped her write a book. So they're watching, and you sometimes don't realize how astute they are and what they're picking up. But they're kind of now seeing you can do whatever you want. You just have to have the idea and the courage to do it.
Well, and I feel like too, we tell our kids from a young age, you can be whatever you want to be. And until like 5 or 6, maybe 7, they're like, woohoo, I'm gonna
Yeah.
fly to the moon. And they,
Yeah.
and then at some point they're like, oh, I can't do that. Oh, I
Hmm.
can't. Oh, I can't. But then they watch their moms or their stepmoms or their aunts or their whoever's in their
Uh-huh.
lives pivot and say, yes,
Mhm.
you can. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
oh, I really can. And I mean, there's going to be enough people in this world who tell you that you can't do something.
Mhm.
Don't let that person be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I loved it when my nephew, he called me one day. He's like, "Do you know how to start a fashion business?" And I'm thinking, no, but we could figure it out. And he said, well, there's these bracelets and necklaces, the baseball we all like to wear. He goes, I think I can make them cheaper and better. I'm like, okay. So, he goes, my mom said she doesn't know how to do it, but I told her you did. And so, I didn't really have a clue at that point, but, we did it. And it was just interesting, not too long ago, he was applying for his first like real, quote unquote, real job, and he had to create a resume, and it's pretty impressive for a 15-year-old. He's started his own business, and then I think about his sister, who's part of that, started her own business but now is an Amazon best-selling author.
Oh,
So that's super
wow.
cool to kind of just see the impact of them watching me make that change, and trying new things and pivoting even my business, right? They've seen me even pivot my business.
Mhm.
It's been cool to kind of watch the impact on them.
Uh-huh. It's so funny that you say that because I started a nonprofit earlier this year, and probably a week or two after it like went live and it, tax exempt, all the things,
Yeah.
my daughter said, I want to do that. Can you help me do that? And I thought, well, I figured it out one time. I'm sure we can figure it out
We
again.
can do it again.
So I was like, can we hold it off till summer?
Yeah.
Let's do that. I love that. All the momentum. Like, give
Yeah.
me to the summer and we'll figure it out.
That's amazing. Well, you'll have to let me know when she starts it, and I'll be as her first supporter.
She she's so funny. She said, "Mommy, I want it to be called Books, Bears, and Blankets."
Nice.
She originally said for kiddos and who are homeless. And a
Uh-huh.
friend of mine is a police officer, and she said, Corey, not that that's not a beautiful vision. She said,
Hmm.
but she said, really, the kiddos who get pulled up and put in foster care, they're the ones who don't have anything. And
Hmm.
I was like, oh, so anyway,
Yeah.
tangent,
Well,
but
I can donate some books from my niece's
oh,
books.
that's beautiful. I would love that. She would be so excited. So speaking of books, I want to pivot
Mhm.
just a little bit. The cost of staying stuck.
Yes.
Staying, no, right?
The cost of staying.
The cost of staying, excuse me.
Yep.
Cost of staying. Tell us about your book. I want to know
Yeah.
all the things where people can get it, but also, the courage it took to write it.
Yeah, so the cost of staying was I just released it April 1st of this year. You can find it on Amazon.com. You can also find it on my website at KristenChimack.com. But the cost of staying, I'd always felt like I wanted to write. I've always enjoyed writing. Um, Part of it is what coming up with like, what do you write? So I had, as I'd kind of left the corporate career, and, the further you get away from it, the more you can look back and see truths that maybe you couldn't see in the moment. And I'd had a lot of people over the course of that first year I'd left reach out and say, "Oh, that took so much courage for you to leave. How did you do that?" And I found with my coaching clients, a lot of what I was coaching them on was the process that I had sort of gone through and developed myself when I was going through it. So I thought, well, I'll write this book. It was it was interesting. It was very easy for me to write because it is based a lot on my experience and the framework that I went through. And I talk about the framework I call the growth through grief spiral,
Mhm,
because the greatest moments of growth always come with grief. And
mhm,
sometimes we don't recognize or acknowledge the grief part of it.
mhm,
So, for me, I absolutely wanted to make the change and leave my corporate career. I resigned on my own, it wasn't a layoff situation. I resigned. I was excited about the next chapter, but
Mhm.
there was an element of grief that some of it I expected just because the company had been such a part of my life. But there were parts of it where overnight, people that I talked to every day for the last 20, 30 years disappeared.
Yes.
People that I considered really close friends disappeared. I
Yes.
couldn't so much as get a like a thumbs up on a text that I would send. So there were elements of grief at the same time that I was excited and growing.
Mhm.
So I thought, you know what? I'm going to put this in a book and talk about the four stages of the growth through grief spiral, use my own story, both leaving my career, but also personal things from my life. I stayed in a 10-year relationship when probably 6 months in, I knew he never wanted to get married and didn't want to have kids. But I stayed because of, right, I loved his family. I loved him. We had a great life, blah, 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 blah. But in the end, the cost of staying was I never had my own children.
Mhm.
But right, the benefit of not having my own children is I have amazing relationships with 14 nieces and nephews and stepkids. So there's always that where you grow the most, there's going to be components of grief. And so that's kind of where the book kind of generated from. The process of writing it was pretty simple. The hard parts were kind of landing on the title, the book design, the launch, and then the scary parts were when it was out in the world and people
Yeah.
were reading it. But it's been, received super well, and I get, reach outs all the time about. I just had a lady call me earlier this week and say, I set up time with you because I just wanted to tell you your book changed the trajectory of my career. And I'd
Mhm.
been wanting to make changes, but I read your book and I've gone in and I've told, my leader that at the end of this year I'm going to leave and I'm going to go do XYZ. So, right, there's absolutely now kind of the moments of, okay, it's doing what I wanted, which I wanted it to help people who were thinking like there has to be more than this and feeling like they had to stay. But,
Mhm.
seeing that there is a path where you can choose yourself and you can find your courage and you can live, a really authentic life and be super happy.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm so glad that you spoke about grief because it's not talked about as much. You
Yeah.
know, as soon as you make that stand and make that decision to put you first, it is amazing
Mhm.
the mirror that that gives to other people that
Yeah.
all of a sudden has them pull back or has them be judgy and negative. And there is a significant growth process through that. And I remember one of my mentors saying, because I was in that process, talking with her about the grief, and she said,
Yeah.
where you have been trying to force yourself into rooms that didn't support you. She said,
Mhm.
now you are growing and you are putting yourself in rooms where people recognize your talent, where people
Mhm.
respect you for who you are. You're now where you were always meant to be. All those
Yeah.
other rooms were just preparing you. And I remember
Mhm.
thinking, oh my gosh, because it is. I mean,
Yeah.
family, friends, people that you'd known for years turning their backs. And it's like,
Mhm.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Didn't expect that. So I
Yeah.
love the honesty piece there because that is something not to scare you by any means, but
Mhm.
to prepare you. Like, know that
Mhm.
you choosing yourself means that other people may walk away. They
Yeah,
won't need
and
to be in your circle.
yeah, and there's the people who choose to walk away.
Mhm.
Then there does come a point, the point that I found almost, I mean, it was hard when people chose to walk away. But then there were the people who chose to stay in your life, who at some point you realize, okay, this relationship has to change, or I'm going to have to choose to walk away.
Uh-huh.
And so, it was interesting. I remember talking to someone probably 6 months after I left, and I'm like, I just don't know, something's going on. Like, I can't figure it out. And she's like, well, it sounds like grief. Like you're learning what parts you have to let go of to move forward. And exactly what you said, like, since I've left that environment, I'm now every day, all day in rooms or talking to women such as you who are super supportive. And some of my biggest aha moments when I left the corporate world is I could be talking to someone and we could be doing the exact same business, same work, be, kind of going after the same clients. And yet she was willing to share clients with me. And I'm thinking, well, what's happening here? That doesn't happen in the corporate world. And it was simply because, there was one client, she just didn't feel personalities matched, and she
Mhm.
thought I would be better able to help. And so that's probably been one of the most refreshing parts of owning my own business and networking with other entrepreneurs is the where you might think it would be super competitive. It's actually one of the most supportive communities that I've ever been in, and vastly different than when you're in the corporate world.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Mhm.
and I think part of how we grew up too, there was always a very judgy, competitive nature of women.
Yeah.
I mean, for the longest time, I had very few close female friends for that very reason.
Yeah.
And when you step out and you step into this new place, there really are women who are reaching their hand out saying, come on, come with me. Let
Yeah.
me share clients with you. Because what it really comes down to is there are what, over a billion?
Lots.
Don't ask my stats. They're not, I
Yeah.
don't know perfectly. People on this planet. We
Yes.
could never serve all of them. And the moment that you step into a room of other women who recognize your strengths and are like, oh, you need to meet so and so, you need to
Mhm.
meet this person. So I'm so glad to hear you say that because it is possible. Those things do actually exist. So
Mhm.
taking the courage and finding them is incredible.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to also talk a little bit about like you have retreats and things. So do you
Mhm.
want to speak to those so that our audience can find out about all of that as well?
Yeah, so I'm in the process. So, my other business is the Hotel Whisperer, and I help source people's meetings and events. So I thought, well, I should do some of my own meetings and events. So coming in 2026, I am going to be doing sort of weekend retreats around the cost of staying, helping people. One of the biggest things that was helpful to me was meeting other individuals who were kind of, going through some of the similar or same experiences, whether thinking about redefining their corporate careers or what can they do when they retire. So the retreats will be focused on the book, The Cost of Staying, and helping people really get clear on their core values and how they show up authentically and how that could translate into whether it's a totally new business or redefining how they show up at work or even a side gig. So those I'm in the process of really designing those. So stay tuned. They'll be posted on my website and LinkedIn that people can get more information. So probably this fall, I'll definitely have some out there.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your time, but I also want to make sure that everyone knows where and how to get in touch with you. So, social media, website, I'll have it all in the show notes, but I'd love for you to tell us as well.
Yeah, so absolutely. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. So you can just search my name, Kristen Chimack, and I love to engage with folks on LinkedIn. You can also set up a free 30-minute coaching call to kind of get to know one another and see if we would be a good match via LinkedIn. And then I have a weekly newsletter you can subscribe to called Kicking It with Kristen, also on LinkedIn. You can find me on my website, www.kristenchimack.com, where you can learn about both my coaching services, the hotel services, and my book. And then, of course, the book you can find on Amazon.com called The Cost of Staying.
I love that so much. Are there any last words that you'd like to share with our audience before we finish today?
I think the only thing I would say is that if you do find yourself in that situation of thinking, there has to be more, or counting the days to when you can retire, there absolutely is more. And it just takes like taking that first step you don't have to make the change, but just to explore what that more could be. Whether it's reaching out to a coach or finding a community or listening to more podcasts, whatever that is that helps you begin to take that step forward, because there absolutely is more. You can work and work full time and be fulfilled and be happy and joyful and all those good things. So just take the first step.
I love that. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
As we close out today's episode, I want to leave you with this. Your next level is already within you. If you're feeling that pull for more clarity, more alignment, and more courage to step fully into who you're meant to be, this is your invitation to take the next step. Whether you're an entrepreneur ready to scale or a woman standing at the edge of something bigger, the path forward starts with trusting your desires, owning your worth, and leading with your inner knowing. This is exactly what I offer: private VIP coaching, and where I guide women inside the 10K Club and 50K Club through consulting with She Sells and Superhuman Selling to help you gain clarity, step into aligned action, and build a life and business that reflects your highest vision. If you're ready to explore what's next, let's have a conversation. Book a free call now at www.corywinn.com/free call. I can't wait to connect with you. Talk soon.